Hi guys, I'm sorry I've been very slow on the videos. They found black mold in our house and half our house actually due to a small leak. And because of that, they've had to tear down half the house. So now we're back on schedule a little bit. So here we are with another video. So if you recall in the previous videos in this series, we talked about this layer of the mind virus called the FAE bias. And so in this video, I want to dedicate a whole video to just FAE bias because this is such a crucial layer that you have to get rid of. A lot of you guys, from seeing a lot of your comments and from seeing applicants coming in, I would say 100% of you guys have what we call FAE bias. And the worst part is that a lot of people who fall for FAE bias don't even know they're falling for it. So in this video, I'm going to show you what FAE bias is and how you can get rid of FAE bias that a lot of my clients and what I do to get rid of a FAE bias and some of the common misconceptions people have about the FAE bias that I think is causing a lot of havoc. And so again, with that said, the FAE bias stands for fundamental attribution error, and it's the cognitive bias that we have that all humans have that is useful back then during survival times, but no longer useful to create thriving relationships. And I'll explain more in a bit. And by the way, guys, if you've been enjoying this series and if you want more content that goes deep into the internal psyche to allow you to create thriving relationships, both internally and also externally, feel free to click the like button, but also feel free to subscribe and click the bell button as well to be notified when I post new videos every single week. And if you want to enroll in our relationship survival program to go even deeper into this topic, then feel free to join me in my masterclass where I'll talk to you at the end of the masterclass about how to apply for the program if you're interested in applying. But let's start here with what is FAE bias. So the fundamental attribution error is the tendency to attribute someone's actions to their personality or character while attributing your own actions to external factors. Now, that can seem very technical. So I think the easiest way for you to understand what FAE bias is what it looks like for you to not have FAE bias. So if you, let's say, are facing a case where your partner is gaslighting you or stonewalling you, maybe they're shutting down and refusing to talk to you about anything. And a lot of you guys facing divorce or separation or the end of your relationship usually face a partner who's either gaslighting, very angry all the time, or stonewalling you. So if you watch a lot of videos on this, you will see that a lot of people will assign the problem to some character problem. Oh, stonewalling, it means that your partner is a narcissist, means there's something wrong with your partner. But so that's what you will interpret if you have FAE bias. For me, for example, when I was going through a case when my partner was stonewalling me very heavily, in fact, she was gaslighting me a lot too because she was very defensive because she was trying to self-preserve because I destroyed safety so much. For me, when people are gaslighting or stonewalling me, the last thing I think is something is wrong with them. The first thing I think is, I wonder how I've destroyed safety. I wonder how I've allowed my partner or forced my partner to self-preserve so that she's stonewalling and gaslighting. So notice here that the FAE bias person straight away goes into attributing someone's actions to their personality or character, while non-FAE bias goes the opposite. They look at what did I do, not what are they doing, what did I do? Another one, if your partner wants space and wants to leave, an easy FAE bias attribution would be, oh, it's because they're not very committed. Oh, because they didn't love me in the first place. Oh, because they don't really care or understand what they have, whatever it is. So again, you're assigning it to character issues. But for me, when my partner wanted space, the last thing I think was that. The first thing I thought was, I wonder what I did to destroy safety, to destroy the environment, the relationship, so that she wants to leave. Because again, my partner didn't start off the relationship wanting to leave. She actually wanted to be with me. She actually left two other people she was dating to be with me. But over time, because I destroyed the environment, that caused her to want to leave. So know the difference in the two there. If your partner's seeing someone else and betraying you, same thing. The first thing that people will think is FAE bias, to say, oh, something is wrong with her. She's unloyal. She's betraying me. She's a betrayer. She's not faithful, whatever it is. But if I was going through this, and if my clients were going through this, the first thing we think would be like, oh, I wonder what I did to cause that. I wonder what the environment is causing. I wonder what destruction of environment is causing this. And you can really extrapolate this to other things that happen or how they're bad behaviors that you often see in relationships. So I want you to pause here for a bit. And if you are facing divorce or separation, maybe your partner's seeing someone else, maybe your partner's stonewalling you, gaslighting you, maybe your partner is doing a lot of other behaviors that appear to be self-preserving, that may be toxic, that may be not so good, is your initial instinct to blame her character or to ask yourself, what did I do to cause this? And this is not a black and white measure. So you could, for example, be non-FA bias. So you could, for example, say, oh, I understand why she's doing this. I understand why she's doing that. I understand why she's doing all these toxic things. But even if there's like 10% of times when she does something and you blame it to her character instead of asking yourself what you did, that is FA bias. And just a 1% FA bias, guys, is enough sometimes to really destroy your behaviors, destroy your microtones, as we'll talk about in a bit. So really here, if you want, comment below on the subtle ways that you fall for the fundamental attribution error. And again, a lot of you guys who fall for this, they don't even know they're falling for this, but really take a look at what are some of the bad behaviors or toxic behaviors right now that your partner is having, and which one grinds your gears the most. And when you find the ones that grinds your gears the most, you'll find that you fall for fundamental attribution error there a lot more than you think. So comment below with what you find here. I want you to pause and really understand where you are, because you need to look hard beyond your blind spots, denial, etc. This whole journey of internal shifts is all about looking beyond your blind spots, your ego, etc. So let's talk about why the FA bias is such a silent killer, why it's so bad to have the FA bias. Number one, it's really the ultimate destroyer of safety and the 5 pillars. So I want you to reverse the roles here a bit. And I want you to imagine that you are with a partner who doesn't try to understand the context behind your mistakes, but instantly assumes something is wrong with you. So for example, let's say that right now you are in a position where you're driven so crazy by your partner that whenever your partner wants to talk, you think to yourself, you know what? Every time I talk to this guy, every time I share something with this guy, nothing really good happens. So you know what? I just don't want to talk. So that interpretation leads you to stonewall. So here you're stonewalling not because you're an asshole, but because you're the environment, the relationship, the culture, the relationship has caused you to shut down so much, to feel so dejected, to feel so apathetic whenever a conversation or your partner wants to talk, that you're like, I don't want to talk anymore. So you're stonewalling here. But instead of trying to understand why you're stonewalling, your partner immediately calls you and someone who doesn't know how to communicate and says, like, you don't know how to communicate, you suck, you are a terrible communicator. How would you feel? Would you be able to feel safe? Would you be able to feel like you can admire that person? Would you be able to feel like you're aligned with that person spiritually, emotionally? Of course not. So to give you another example of this, for me back then with my partner, she used to get defensive a lot. So whenever I would point out some problems to her, she would kind of subtly turn the problem back on me. And she would defend herself very, very heavily by attacking me back. Now, once I understood the real reasons behind why she was doing that, it was really a contextual problem, not a character problem. It was that I tend to use stuff she says, use stuff she did to bite her in the ass back. And I would use the stuff she says against her in a way. And I would also assume too much about her character. So whenever she would make a mistake, I would assume a character issue. And that caused her to feel very unsafe. And that caused her to self-preserve a lot more. So I put myself in my partner's shoes and imagine if I feel so unsafe with this person to the point where I need to defend myself all the time very harshly. And whenever I need to defend myself, this person then turns it back on me again and says something is wrong with my character. I would feel even less safe again. So I remember when I was younger with my dad, for example, he would be very stubborn and he would always attack me. I would always feel very attacked. And he would not listen to my side until I screamed it at him. But what's funny is that when I screamed what I felt at him, he would then switch the conversation away from the topic into saying, oh, you screaming is a bad thing. You have an anger issue, Jeff. You have emotional issues. So I want you to reverse the roles here again and imagine again that you are with someone who, whenever you do something, they don't try to discover the context behind what you do, but they just instantly assume something is wrong with you, something wrong with your character, you would feel very, very unsafe very, very quick. And this, of course, guys, can be done overtly sometimes. And of course, when you do it overtly, it's bad, but often done very covertly. So I remember back in a relationship when my partner was starting her own business, and she would always do what I call lies of omission about her business. So whenever she would work on something, do something, spend money on something, or go to trips to do something for her business, and I would ask her, for example, hey, what's going on? Can you tell me? And she would always not tell me. She would always tell me less than what I need to know. So lies of omission here. And I used to always blame her character for it. I would always say, for example, oh, she's not a very expressive person. She's not a very communicative person. She doesn't really know how to communicate. But that actually made her feel a lot more unsafe. It was until I changed my approach to be more of, okay, my partner is not really feeling safe to tell me, so she's committing lies of omission towards me. I wonder what is the environment that I've created to lead her to act this way. Because again, she wasn't like this with her friends. She wasn't like this with her parents. She wasn't like this with her family and other people. She was only committing more lies of omission with me, right? So this is a very covert way that I did FA bias, and how FA bias covertly destroyed the safety in my relationship. And these covert ones are really the real killer. Because if you were to ask me back then, right, is lies of omission right or wrong? And if I see lies of omission from my partner, is she a bad communicator? I would say, yeah, it's true. Like if I watch videos and that says, for example, oh, my partner's not very communicative, she's stonewalling me or not, oh, she's a narcissist. Everyone will say that's right. That's a correct hypothesis for why she's doing that way. But this is why it's so crucial to be extremely antithetic about your FA bias, because they always feel like they're right, but they're never right. But they feel very right. So again, the reason why I asked you guys to pause and really reflect on how the subtle ways that you fall for the FA bias is because it's really, really difficult to spot. In our program, we help people spot the FA bias for them sometimes to begin with, but they really learn the empathetic skills to be able to spot whenever they're falling for FA bias themselves. And this is a skill you cultivate. And another part about FA bias that is so deadly, but also so difficult to catch, is that it creates self-confirming prophecies. So let's say here that I have FA bias here, and the event is that my partner is having lies of omission, and I interpret that as, oh, she's a bad communicator. And if I interpret that as a bad communicator, I would feel quite annoyed, quite angry, quite vexed, quite hopeless even, which then would change my actions. In this case, I would either attack her back, I would try to give her feedback that is really unnecessary and irrelevant to what she's actually feeling and going through right now, which the outcome in that case would be, again, she would feel even less safe. When she feels even less safe, right, she would shut down more. So this makes the event worse. So she would shut down more, have more lies of omission. When she would have more lies of omission, that would confirm in my mind, I knew it. She's a bad communicator. And note that for a lot of people falling for this trap, falling for the FA bias trap, there's really not a place in this whole flow where you question, you stop, and you ask yourself, is my interpretation correct? Everything is just self-confirming, and the outcome becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you think something is wrong with your partner, what you will do will actually make that come true. And nowhere in this can you ever catch yourself. That is the most dangerous part about FA bias. And in my experience, getting people out of FA bias is often the most difficult task, because again, if you are falling for FA bias to the point where you've destroyed safety so much, this cycle has been self-confirming for so long that for someone to see the absurdity of the FA bias is very difficult. And the third reason why it's so deadly is that it blinds you to infinite solutions. Most, if not all, ingenious solutions that exist today are bred from people who make decisions without FA bias. FA bias is really the blocker to revolutionary thinking. So let's give some examples here. So let's look at UPS trucks. If you notice, so UPS truck, for those of you who are not in the US, is a delivery service here in the US, or USPS. If you look at delivery trucks, and I challenge you to have fun with this, if you look at delivery trucks, in normal roads, they don't turn left. They only turn right. Why? Because in the US, we are a left-hand drive country, so you can turn right on red, but you cannot turn left on red. You have to wait for the traffic. And so in order for the route to be faster, they try to optimize the number of times that the trucks turn right and plan the route so that they avoid turning left as much as possible. Now, sometimes you will see it, but they will maximize the moments they will turn right. Now, think about what it would take for someone to come up with a solution. It's a very ingenious solution, but think about what it would take. If the UPS, for example, or delivery services were to say, okay, our drivers are not making deliveries on time, they're a bit slow. If they fall for FA bias, they go and they say, our drivers just need to learn how to drive faster. That is a true fact. Yes, they could drive faster. But if you think that, you would not come up with this ingenious solution. For you to come up with this ingenious solution, you need to go, okay, our drivers are not at fault here. It's a system that is at fault. How can I change the system to allow our drivers to make it easier for them to drive faster? Only then, only from that thinking, can you actually solve this problem. Same thing for the ATM. If you look at ATMs, you will see that they will dispense your card first and then your cash. Now, back then with a lot of people, now ATMs back then, right, in the beginning times, I remember when I was growing up in Indonesia, I would go to the ATM, but I would always forget my card. Why? Because they would dispense your cash first, and then once you dispense your cash, they dispense your card. But to be honest, once I get my cash, I'm out of there, right? That's what I need. I need the cash. The card I forget. So if, for example, the designers of ATM machines were to fall for FA bias and say, well, people just need to stop being so forgetful, nobody would have come up with this ingenious solution of dispensing the card first. But for you to come up with the solution of dispensing the card first, you would have to think to yourself, look, the user is not at fault here. I need to change the system, the environment, to allow the user to make it harder for them to make mistakes. And the iPhone is the same thing. If you think about any first world innovations, iPhones, electric cars, or all the innovations that you have in your home, like Alexa, whatever it is, this involves someone not looking at the user and seeing the user as the problem, but looking at the environment and seeing what product or what service can I give to make the right behavior easier for the consumer. And if you look at leaders of companies, they do the same thing. When their employees are not doing well or not showing up on time, not doing things properly, they don't look at the people and go, something is wrong with you, you need to do better. They look at the overall environment and change the incentive program, change the environment, change the culture, change the rules to allow the right behaviors to come better, right? So I can name endless more examples of this, but again, any ingenious solutions you have, by definition, are solutions that requires you to get out of FAA bias first. If you fall for FAA bias, the best solution you can get is really just for wishing other people to do better, which is why we call it true. So FA bias is true, it feels true, but it's useless. You can't really do anything with it. So for example, if you assign your partner's problems to, oh, she's a narcissist, she's a stonewaller, she's a bad communicator. Okay, great. That can feel true, but what good does it do you? What usefulness can you gain from it besides just telling your partner to stop and wishing she stops and wishing things to get better while you sit back and just mope around? There's something you can do with it. I always give this toolbox analogy to my clients too. And I want you to understand again the value, the importance, or the danger here of having even a 1% FAE bias. So I want you to imagine here that you have a toolbox with a lot of tools. In one scenario, you are only 99% sure that the tool you're looking for is somewhere here. So let's say you don't find the tool that you're looking for right away. That after 5 minutes of looking, you're like, the tool is not there, right? If you just have that 1% doubt, the 1% doubt that the tool may not be here, what are the odds that you will stop looking? pretty high. But consider a second scenario where you have now zero doubt that the tool is here. You have zero doubt the tool is in here somewhere. So if you cannot find the tool right away, your mind doesn't go, well, I mean, maybe I'll stop looking because there is a 1% chance the tool is not there. But if you are now 100% sure it's there. So if you don't find a tool, you'll think, maybe I'm just not looking hard enough. Maybe I'm missing something. And you will keep looking until you find it because, again, you are 100% sure. So the thing is this, if you are only 99% sure here that your partner's behavior is caused by environmental issues, and you have a 1% chance that you think that her behavior is caused by some character issue. When you're trying to investigate and understand the set of context that leads to her behavior, you will stop looking prematurely. That is 100%. That 1% doubt is enough for you to stop looking prematurely. But if you get rid of FA bias fully, that is when you will never stop looking until you find a set of context. And that 1% is enough to make that biggest difference, which is why in our program, a lot of our clients focus so much on FA bias. And FA bias is one of the biggest mind viruses that people get rid of because it's so sneaky, and just 1% of it can kill a lot of things already. And again, it's so hard to spot because it feels right, but it's actually very wrong. This right here, the cycle right here, is why couples grow apart and why they eventually drive each other nuts. So imagine here in that example of my partner having lies of omission. So let's say I keep this cycle going where she has lies of omission. I interpret that as she is a bad communicator, which makes me feel angry. My anger then destroys safety even more. When I destroy safety, she has more lies of omission. And I repeat that. Not only am I going to get more and more angry at my partner, but my partner is going to feel less and less understood, less and less safe. We're going to continue to grow apart. We're going to continue to communicate less and less and less, right? But the funny part about this is that each of us will feel like our interpretation of the other person is true. So my interpretation of my partner that she's a bad communicator is true and becomes more true over time. And my partner's interpretation that I don't understand, that I cannot understand, becomes more and more true over time. But really, if you look at it objectively, neither of us are true. So here, this is the very definition of making mountains out of molehills, where we are angry over nothing. We're angry over a misunderstanding. And this is how, if you look at this happening for a lot of different parts of the relationship, this is how you guys grow apart. FA bias is really the silent killer. And if I look at a lot of the comments that I get on my YouTube channel, for example, so let's look at this one here. So basically, his wife of 25 years, girlfriend 8 years before, just told me this, which is she wants to leave. We've been together since 15 years old. We grew up together and have trust and safety since the beginning. We've always talked about our emotions and feelings. Our children are moving on, and she told me she has went through the stages of life of a wife and then being pulled in multiple directions. Now that is over, and she wants to be by herself. This has broke my heart because she's my world. We have had a great relationship, and this came out of left field. I've been the same guy since the beginning. So here's a guy who basically his wife is leaving out of the blue, and he's saying, whatever it is, it can't be a problem with me because I'm the same person. She's the one that changed. She's the one that's different. So notice the very subtle FAE bias here. So there's probably a lot of things that he doesn't know about that is causing his wife to feel like, I don't feel like this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with anymore. But notice how his FAE bias prevents him from truly understanding his partner. And his FAE bias is also preventing his partner from feeling truly understood. Because to be honest, whenever someone tells me this came out of left field, it's telling me that there is a lot of broken parts of safety here that prevent her from actually telling him this truth a long time ago. Because her desire to leave didn't come out overnight. It's not like she just didn't wake up one day and go like, I want to leave and abandon my whole life forever. She's probably been festering this for a very long time, but why isn't she expressing? I wonder, right? Is it because of FAE bias? But I don't understand how come these things never happen with a woman who truly loves you. My problem is that my husband likes to see other women. What if she already has friends with benefits? So all these are very subtle ways that people are falling for FA bias. These are cases where people are seeing that their partner wants to leave and doing something bad, but in their mind, they've already assumed that they're not the problem, that they haven't done anything to affect the situation or the culture or the environment to cause that behavior in their partner. They're convinced that whatever behavior their partner has is a problem with women in general or their partner in general, but not really what they have done, right? This is a very subtle way people fall for FA bias. And no doubt, everyone who says this here, they feel like their interpretation is true. They feel like the interpretation of why things are happening the way they are is true. But again, that's why FA bias is such a killer. It feels so true. But if you look at all these people and the way they interpret it, what use is any of this do? What use is that? So this guy, for example, what use is you saying her wanting to leave is her having a midlife crisis, something wrong with the way she's doing? Because all you can do now is just sit back and go, well, I hope my partner is doing better. That's it. So again, all FA bias are what we call TBUs. They're true, but useless. And I wouldn't even say it's true, but they feel true. So assigning your partner as a narcissist feels true, but what can you do with it? It's a useless fact. But if I say, for example, my partner is stonewalling me and it's because I haven't been creating safety, that feels also true, but is useful. Because now creating safety is something I can do. I can control. It's within my grasp of locus of control here. And last thing, again, it festers very subconsciously. It acts like a hidden slow leak. Yourself and your partner will live in a culture where observing, bringing up, and fixing the damages of FA bias will never come up. So to understand this one, I want to go back to my story about the mold situation. So the reason why this mold got so bad, guys, is because when we were doing our initial inspection of our house, and we just built this house like a year and a half ago, we were looking for the big issues, like big structural issues, big foundational issues, big water leaks, and we didn't find anything. So it was like, great, but what I learned from this was the reason why this mold started was because we had a small leak, a very slow leak. Like we're talking one drip every 5 minutes kind of leak, very tiny leak, and behind one of our faucets in our master bathroom. And the small leak that is so difficult to catch was the one that destroyed our house. This leak is the one that caused mold to grow in our master bathroom, master bedroom, and all the way down to our lower floors. So all the lower floors are gone. Like it's all rotted. It's all mold here. It's terrible. And FA bias is almost like this slow leak. If you look at the way FA bias destroys the relationship, you will not see it destroying the relationship. You will not see it. But it's a small leak over time. It festers over time. The same way, a lot of these people earlier, they are not going to understand how all these small things that you think about, that you say about your partner, about the situation, none of this stuff seems wrong on the surface. But all these small little assumptions, a small little FA bias really affects the overall culture of the safety over time. It really is a death by 1,000 cut stings. You have to be very careful about FA bias here. Make sure you're not subtly falling for them. And a great story here also is I made this post to my community on June 13th. And I'm just going to read it out to you. I said, I was helping a gentleman with his relationship today. And his stubborn mentality reminds me of so much of my stubborn mentality back then. Let this be a lesson to never be like this. I used to be someone who thought I was right all the time. It got so bad to the point that people stopped disagreeing and arguing and correcting me. Everything I said, they just said yes and allowed me to do whatever the fuck I wanted and never told me I was wrong. The worst part, I used my hypothetic and blind VMs to tell me that if no one was disagreeing, arguing, or correcting me, that means I'm correct. But the reality was that I was so far from being right. The truth is that everyone just stopped trying to course correct me. People only agreed with me and let me do whatever the fuck I wanted because they thought I was fucking hopeless. There's no point in disagreeing or correcting me because nothing good would come out of it. So the reason why FA bias can destroy someone's relationship and culture of the relationship so much is that if you fall for a lot of FA bias and you make a lot of assumptions about your partner too much, you're going to be so convinced that your assumptions are correct. And when you fall for FA bias too much, you also destroy a lot of safety. But when you destroy safety, you will make it so much harder for your partner to correct your FA bias. The same way my partner, for example, she had to commit lies of omission because she felt so unsafe to tell me everything that she needed to tell me. And whenever she would have a lies of omission, I would tell her, oh, it's because you're a bad communicator. But me saying you're a bad communicator, what are the odds that she would correct me on that misunderstanding? What are the odds she would say, Jeff, I'm not actually a bad communicator. I'm actually a good communicator, but you made it very hard for me to become a good communicator. What are the odds she would tell me that? Zero. Because I made it so unsafe. She would never tell me that because I would get batshit fucking crazy. Right? So whenever I would tell her you're a bad communicator, she wouldn't change my perception on that. She wouldn't correct me on that. And when she would not correct me on that, I would go, see, she's not correcting me because I'm right. No, it's not because I'm right. It's because I was dead fucking wrong. I was so wrong that I made it so unsafe for people to correct me. So be careful of this. This can fester very, very silently. So how do you get out of FA bias? Number one is you have to appreciate the subtle blindness. You will not and you cannot fix something you don't realize is even a problem. FA bias, in fact, a lot of other biases that we'll talk about in the program, is a survival mechanism. It is not a thriving mechanism. It's something that requires constant awareness. So we have to understand that any biases that we have is a survival mechanism, right? The reason why we make so many assumptions about people, we stereotype people, is because it protects us from falling for certain traps that will literally kill us sometimes. But these biases, while they protect us from dying, they're not going to allow us to thrive. So escaping a death and chasing a thriving is very different things. So if you are falling for FA bias, yes, you will not die, but yes, you will also not thrive. A great example of this are, people who go into new relationships with the intention to survive and self-protection. And so they never really, for example, give their heart to the other person. They never really become vulnerable for the other person. Yeah, you will probably put yourself in a position where people cannot hurt you, but you will also going to slowly and subtly sabotage the relationship from ever thriving, from flowering. And you see a lot of people who are bringing past traumas to new relationships, not being able to make the new relationships work because they're really trying to survive, not trying to thrive. And so this is why, again, FA bias often feels true, but also useless because it feels true in the sense that self-protection seems like it's right. Like a lot of people, for example, who are watching this video might say, for example, like, hey, sometimes women need to assume their husbands are narcissists because it protects them. Yes, that's true, but it's also useless in terms of trying to create a thriving relationship. And it's why people blindly fall for FA bias. And it's why in our program, this is a snapshot of all the activity people have about FA bias, FA bias, FA bias. It's one of the key mind viruses that people learn and develop the skill to get out of. And once you adopt this awareness that you have FA bias, the next thing that I want you to develop as a skill is to never judge people's actions without understanding the intentions first. You need to develop what we call an antithetic filter to develop the skill. So nothing is good or bad until the intention is known. Be careful of assuming intentions from an action. Develop curiosity of intentions. This is a habit, a skill you can develop. So again, an action, the value of an action cannot be known until the intention is known. For example, an action can be someone donating $1 million to charity. Is that good or bad? To be honest, we don't know until we see why. What is the intention that that person has for giving that $1 million? If the intention is to control the charity, to take over the charity, to make the charity dependent on you as an ego trip thing, or as a way to like a PR stunt for you to appear like you're amazing, suddenly the action doesn't seem as noble anymore. But if your intention is to just help the people in need, then suddenly the action becomes more noble. The intention colors the action. So the problem that a lot of people have is they often take a look at an action and they assume too much about the intention from the action. And this is something a lot of people do. I remember when I was growing up, my dad would say to me something like this, right? Someone would do something and they would go, "Oh, see, I've seen people like this before. I know why they're doing this. They're doing this because they're this. They're evil. They're doing this. They have bad intentions, whatever it is." And as a kid, I used to look at that, my dad going like, "Wow, my dad is so smart. He can understand someone, he can know someone's intentions and who they are deep down from one action. Wow, that is so intelligent. That is so smart." But as I grow older, and my dad is no longer like this, by the way. We talked about this before. And when I'm older, though, I realize that assuming an intention from an action is not a very smart thing to do. It's actually a very dumb thing to do. But it doesn't look dumb because when you make an assumption about someone's action from someone's intention from their action, how do you prove them wrong? Right? You can't. You can't really prove them wrong. It's really hard to prove them wrong. So again, never make an assumption about someone's intention behind their action. It just makes you dumb. It doesn't make you smart. A lot of men like to do this. They like to read people, overread people too much, and overassume people too much, especially their partners. Be careful of this. Doesn't make you smart, it makes you dumb. So now I developed this habit where whenever someone or my partner does something I don't understand, my last resort is to assume an intention, but I would discover this first with her. And until this is known, I wouldn't make any judgments about her actions, either good or bad. And another skill you can develop is what we call building context from understanding. So this is deeper than understanding. This is called understanding. And this is when the previous lessons of SOC, controlled compassion, and emotional literacy comes in. But for every action, there must be a set of context that makes that action make sense to that person. Think how this applies to you. Okay, so I want you to pause here and think about the fact that every action has an intention behind it, and every intention is colored from all of your past, your present, and your future circumstances. So future here meaning like what you think will happen in the future, right? So my partner, for example, she was always very career driven. So the thing that we talk about in our relationship is always that I wish she was a bit more feminine sometimes, a bit more motherly, a bit more like nurturing, and less of a power woman. Like she wants to work all day long, and she would sometimes forego family stuff for work stuff. At least this was back then. We're no longer like this, but back then. So her action was that she would always prioritize work over relationships or family stuff. And I would always assume an intention that she was, you know, she was not a family person. She doesn't care about people. She only cares about herself. She was very selfish. She just wants money for herself, whatever it is. But when I understood the intention here was really that, um, you know, she grew up in a household, in an Asian household where being feminine was not really appreciated. So she had to be very masculine. So her becoming a good mother, for example, starting a family, having a lot of friends, being very, very feminine, those were never really appreciated. What was appreciated was how much money you earned, how successful your business was, right? So because of that, her actions tend to be very masculine, very go-getting, very career-oriented. And her intentions, though, are colored by her past experiences and what she's currently feeling and what she fears would happen if she forgoes career and goes into family, because she would have a fear that like, oh, nobody will respect me, I'll become like a deadbeat wife, whatever it is, right? Because of that. And once I understood that, I understood not only her actions, but I understood her intentions better, but I understood the set of context that led to her intentions. And I'm sure you feel the same thing too in your life, where sometimes you make a mistake, maybe you have an anger issue, maybe you have some something you do that grinds your partner's gears a lot, right? And your partner always gets angry at you and never really tries to understand where you're coming from. And you sometimes, there's a lot of times what I wish, for example, that, hey, can you just please just ask and get to know me why I do the things I do and why I feel the things I feel, why I behave the way I behave, why I think the way I think. Sometimes we wish other people would just ask us that. When you try to understand someone's context that makes up their intentions, that is the gift you're giving someone. You're giving someone the gift of understanding. And just think about how safe, how cathartic you feel when someone just takes the time to understand the context that makes you you. So this is something that I teach all my clients, right? So if I see my partner's behavior here and I don't understand it at first, I would find one context and really put myself in my partner's shoes, and ask myself, like, okay, if I take this behavior under this context, would this behavior make sense? Yes or no? If it's a yes, I stop looking. If it's a no, I go, okay, I must be missing something else. So I might add and discover, either with her or alone, more context. Now I go, okay, given this 5 things, would this behavior make sense? Would I do the same thing given these contexts? Yes, stop looking. If it's a no, I would keep going. I would form more context, right? And this doesn't really stop until I found all the contexts that lead to this behavior. And this sometimes can take a long time, as we'll discover later. But basically, I treat it like a game where I'm trying to find a set of contexts that would make me go, if I was living my life with these contexts, past, present, future, I would do the exact same thing. I would totally do the exact thing. I would understand this as well. And until you get here, you don't stop. So you can see here how if you have FA bias, you will stop this very prematurely. Because once the seed goes into like, okay, would I do the same thing? No, because something is wrong with her, I will stop looking, right? The only way you can keep looking for the full set of context that explains the behavior is if you do not fall for FA bias at any point. So FA bias is not like a momentary thing. It's a constant thing you need to have, the non-FA bias. When you stop judging people's actions before understanding intentions, and when you come from that place of understanding to build a set of context that makes you understand their behaviors a lot more, you are going to create a lot of safety for that person. But this can only be done without FA bias. And the next thing is also want you to believe in people's potential or core of who they are. And I want you to be amazed at how much behavior can change when you change environments or contexts. If you can't believe in others, stay away from them. Here's what I mean. So, there's been a lot of studies since the dawn of time. There's been a lot of studies that show how much behaviors can change when you just change someone's environment a little bit. You have, for example, studies like the Stanford Prison Experiment, where you put really normal people, even sometimes like leaders of their environment, of their culture, of their society, and you put them into an environment where it makes them really hard to be nice. They become fucking evil. So if you haven't checked out this study, go check out this study. And it's all because, again, of their environments affecting their behaviors. Same thing with a lot of gentrifying cities. It's a quasi-experimental study, of course, but when you clean up a city, so you green vacant lots, you clean up trash, that will actually reduce a lot of gun violence and other serious forms of crime for that area. So you can change the behavior of a whole area, of a whole region, by changing the environment around it. And this actually happened in Houston downtown. If you look at Houston downtown, it used to be a very dangerous place, but now it's very much gentrified. Because if you look at Houston downtown now, they put little plants, trees in the middle of the street. They clean up, they put more trash cans, right? And suddenly the whole downtown now is a lot safer. And same thing for our program too. We pay very close attention to the culture of our program to promote the right kinds of behavior that we want and to discourage the wrong kinds of behavior that we don't want. We don't just tell people to do better. We pay a lot of attention to changing the culture a lot. And you'll see kind of the same pattern in your relationship. So the misconception people have often is that people often say, oh, you can't change other people. The truth is you can. In fact, we change people's environments all the time. And you actually have changed your partner's behavior already. So when you look at your own relationship, for example, when you first met your partner, was she a stonewaller? Was she a gaslighter? Did she want to leave? Was she non-committal? Of course not. Usually she's very committed. She's very expressive. She's very kind, very gentle. But over time, she became unkind. She became stonewally. Why? Is it because you changed her behavior? So how do behaviors change? You change behaviors by changing the environment or culture. In this case, a lot of you guys have been changing the environmental culture in a negative way, which changes her behavior in a negative way. But if you can change it in a negative way, you can change it in a positive way by changing the environment or culture again. And what we mean by environmental culture is really the 5 pillars. So get that straight. So when you create safety, when you create admiration, when you create alignment, when you create the environment for passion, you slowly will change your partner's behavior. So this whole notion of you can't change other people or it takes two to tango, it's fucking bullshit. Because you alone can change the environment or culture. You can be that leader. And you'll be amazed at what happens when you change the environment or culture. You'll be amazed at how much your partner's behavior can change. And if you look at any of my client stories, you'll see this to be true. They're always amazed. Wow, I didn't know my partner could be capable of such things. And a lot of you guys are hearing this and going, rolling your eyes and going like, yeah, right, you're right. My partner's different. If you're saying your partner's different, what you're really saying, guys, is I have given her the best environment possible and she's still doing bad things. Think about what you insinuate about your partner and what that says about the environment you're subconsciously creating. If you're saying, I have given her the best environment possible and she's still doing bad things, what you're saying is that your partner is so fucked up that even when you gave her the perfect environment, she still cannot behave like a normal fucking human being. Think about if someone thought that of you. They're like, my husband, I gave him the perfect environment and she's still a fucking shitty husband. Would you feel safe? Would you feel like you're being admired? No. So here's the FA bias paradox, is that people who fall for FA bias often think that they have done everything they can to make the environment perfect, that whatever their partner's feeling or doing is partner's fault, that they're so fucked up that they cannot help but do bad things anyway. They're so animalistic, they cannot help but do bad things anyway. If you said that, do you realize that it's impossible that you have created a safe environment? I mean, would you feel safe? So see the paradox there? You should never fall for FA bias. So pause and really think about that paradox, right? So if you are insisting to me that your case is different, that it can't be because you fell for FA bias that she wants to leave, then you need to stay very far away from her. Because not only is she bad for you, but you are also very bad for her. And the funny part is that you shouldn't blame her for self-preserving behaviors. So if she's doing a lot of self-preserving things like stonewalling, gaslighting, and you think, oh, that's her fault, no wonder why she's like that, because you think so lowly of her. And of course, the next thing is just to follow up the internal shifts with frameworks. And so the next year is going to be about frameworks. But once you can come from a place of curiosity, understanding, compassion, picking the right what, how, and why for how you conduct the way you talk is much easier. Because now the conversation no longer becomes about you justifying yourself and you explaining yourself, but becomes about understanding. It becomes a much more productive conversation, and it's easier to come to the right conversation from this mindset of non-FA bias. Now let's address some common misconceptions people have about this, right? Number one, give it time. So when I say that when you create safety, when you get out of FA bias, you can create a lot of safety. And once you create safety, you can really change your partner's behavior. That's not overnight, guys. Sometimes this thing can last for 6 to 12 months or more in some cases. In the next video, we'll talk about the allergy to resistance and the paradox of change. And you'll see why sometimes when you start to create safety, you will actually get more resistance in the short term because people get suspicious. But give it time. It's not an overnight thing. Your partner is not a freaking robot, right? She's a complex human being, just like you and I. If you think your case is an exception, again, go back to the previous argument of like, do you see the paradox of FA bias? Context can sometimes be complex and beyond words and patiently discover. So many of the behaviors my partner has sometimes takes months or years for me to fully understand. This process should be normal, fun, and is the point of relationships. So sometimes when I tell people to like understand the concepts or the context behind their partner's behavior, they get really impatient and they try to have a conversation and they don't understand it within one day. They're like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. Nope, you're not doing something wrong, right? People are complex. Humans are complex. The same way, if you try to explain to someone, why are you the way you are? What was the set of context that led you to do the things you do? You're not gonna debunk that overnight. You're not gonna debunk that in one day, which is why sometimes therapy can last years, because trying to understand even the motivation behind one behavior can take months or years even. So don't feel like you're doing something wrong if you're not fully understanding someone's context overnight. In fact, this process is normal and should be fun. If you look at a lot of the conversations my partner and I have, it's about this. It's about understanding the context, understanding the previous experiences, the future fears, the current ongoings that makes my partner. And so our conversations is not really to get to the destination of understanding, but we actually enjoy the process of understanding. And that's something that you need to understand and how to learn. And this is discussed a lot in the concept of untethering, right? Not really tethering yourself to the outcome, but tethering yourself to the process of discovery. So if you go back to this example that I gave you earlier about finding the set of context, this journey of finding context, guys, is the point. Is really the fun part for us. We have a lot of fun doing this. So our goal is not to get to the finish line on this. Our goal is to have fun in the process of finding this. It's almost like a video game again. The point of the video game is not for you to see the ending credits and you beating the final boss. The point of the video game is for you to enjoy the process of fighting the final boss. I hope that makes sense. And this level of paradigm shift and curiosity is something you can actually develop in your own relationship too. But this is something you need to change in terms of what you see a relationship is. A relationship is the process of understanding each other. A relationship is not the outcome of understanding. And when you understand someone, guys, it's not an interrogative thing. So again, if your conversations about understanding seems to be interrogative and your partner feels interrogated, you're doing it wrong. So you're not having the right frameworks, but it should be, again, this culture of not really you versus your partner or you trying to understand your partner. Is really about like you and your partner working together to understand each other. You see what I mean? So it's not you versus her, it's you and her versus the lack of understanding. See the difference there? And yes, you can change other people's behaviors. I'm not going to go into this too much, but we already did so. But the last thing is also be quick to understand others' intentions, be slow to explain yours. So a lot of people sometimes when they struggle with FA bias is because their brains are tuned to the wrong frequency. And just like a radio, your brain cannot be tuned to two frequencies simultaneously. So often we cannot understand someone's context because our mind isn't tuned that way. For example, in our program, we really vet the people that we enroll. And sometimes we can really see whether someone's brain is tuned to learning or teaching by the way they respond. So sometimes we get people we try to enroll. They tend to, I don't know why men do this, but they tend to like give me feedback or give me advice about how to run my business. And I didn't ask for that. And when people do that, it tells me that their brain isn't tuned to understanding other people. The brain is tuned for other people to understand them. And a lot of people too like to tell stories too, right? And when people like to tell stories in the application calls, it tells me that they want other people to understand them, but they're not really interested in understanding other people. Because if I was, if I had an hour with Warren Buffett, for example, if I had an hour with someone I respect, I'm going to shut the fuck up during that hour because my brain is tuned to, okay, what can I learn from Warren Buffett? Warren Buffett doesn't need to understand my life story. I need to understand Warren Buffett's life story. So when you have this tendency to try to over-explain yourself, to tell people your story, especially to us, it usually tells me that you fall for FA bias a lot because you're so interested in explaining your story to other people, but not really interested in understanding other people's story. And so with that said, you tend to make too many assumptions about other people. You tend to not understand other people deeply. And you can't help it. So that's a big way that people fall for FA bias that you need to watch out for. But that was a video on FA bias, guys. I hope that was helpful for you to understand the what, how, and why behind FA bias and how to get out of it as well. And if you want to dive deeper into this topic, guys, of FA bias and other key paradigm shifts and key skills that really can change the way internal place you come from in a relationship to make the right behaviors just a lot easier, and for reconciliation to be easier as well, feel free to join me in my masterclass on the 5 proven steps to rebuilding your relationship from the ground up. In that masterclass, I'll show you the exact process I teach all my clients that takes it from ground 0 to 100. So if you want to join the masterclass, I'll leave the link up above or down below this video. And if you want to apply for the Relationship Rebel program, stick around to the end of the masterclass where I show you for 20 minutes how to apply for the program if you are interested in doing so. But I hope that was helpful for you guys. And in the next video, we're going to talk about paradox of change and facing resistance and how you need to be thriving in the face of resistance and why you need to do that. And in the next video, we're going to close up this whole internal shift series to let you see the overall big picture of what other internal shifts we didn't talk about in this free version, but also what is the point of all this internal shift that we're doing here. But with that said, guys, I'll leave you to it, and I'll see you in the next video.